It's nice to sit on the bench on Jewish street, Žydų gatvė in Kėdainiai. I've read somewhere that Jewish women in a poor neighborhood, in this poor neighborhood, used to come out to the street with a bowl of soup to eat it. If you think that it was a soup with meat and with some vegetables, no, I don't think so. Most probably it was a plain soup, maybe with a little bit of potatoes. That's how somebody described poor life of poor Jews in Keidainiai. So at the same time, you see brick houses, which means that some of them were better off. Yeah, there were merchants and craftsmen and tailors and shoemakers and hat makers and jewelers and doctors and later on lawyers and later on politicians. This Jewish community filled the town of Keidainiai since 1500s throughout to the Holocaust. Today this street is called the Jewish street, but it was not called so in the old days. It had the name synagogue or synagogue street, and in general a lot of streets in Keidainiai have different names today. So this abandoned house belonged also to a Jewish family, and here is a little sign on the wall which shows the old picture of it, and it's the junction of two streets, and this house was partly commercial and partly dwelling house of a Jewish family. Now the annex to that house is very interesting and unique object in the whole of Lithuania. It's a permanent sukkah, a permanent oil for Sukkot holiday. It's a little wooden annex. You will see it in a second. And why it is sukkah? Because here there is a big window in the roof. So when you sit in sukkah, you can open this big window and you can use this little annex as a sukkah. By the way, here it's for sale, so we can inquire what's the price. We are in one of the three synagogues in Keidainiai. Today it's under the reconstruction. For long years it was a warehouse and a shop for construction materials, but we can clearly see that the women's section has remained. We can see the little arched windows over there. The main hall of the synagogue is here. The bima was here in the center, and the Aron HaKodesh was here, the ark was here, so we can clearly see the empty space, the white space between the two windows, and we can see some decorations of the walls, some color. The decoration of the ceiling, I'm not sure that it's original from the times of the synagogue, and for sure we know today that the synagogue after the reconstruction will be used for cultural needs of Keidainiai city. It was exciting to be inside the synagogue, which is under the renovation at the moment. I'll show you briefly the exterior decoration of the synagogue, which is in much better shape than the interior, which was used as a warehouse and a shop. So we are now in the courtyard of the synagogue. So classical Lithuanian structure of the synagogue, 1/3 2 floors and 2/3 1 floor. Now this synagogue is considered by local population, by Lithuanian Jewish community as the synagogue of the Vilna Gaon. Why? Because for a long period of time there was a plug on the wall saying that Vilna Gaon studied in Keidan since the age of 6 or 7. So his father was a rabbi, and he wanted his talented son to study at the yeshiva religious seminary, and he brought him to Keidainiai in 1726 or 1727. At that time, Keidainiai was known as a big center of Torah studies, and Vilna Gaon was accepted to the yeshiva, and he graduated the yeshiva studies more or less at the age of 10 or 11. From here he moved to Vilnius, lived there, later on came back to Keidainiai. There was a shidduch, a matchmaking, and he married Hannah, a woman from Keidainiai, and they had 8 children. Of course, we'll speak more about Vilna Gaon during this tour and also in the other episodes of our virtual tours. Now we jump to the main street of Keidainiai, the main street of the old city of Keidainiai. Today it's called Didžioji, the big street. A lot of shops, a lot of dwelling houses. In the past, a lot of Jewish houses and a lot of Jewish shops as well. And I hold a book in a new binding. It's a book, it's a phone book from 1940. And here we have Kedainiai as well, and we have a lot of Jewish surnames in the list. We have Goldberg, Lombik, Gotler, Gurvitch. Chaim was the owner of the oldest pharmacy in Lithuania. There was a Keidan and one more Keidan, which is Cohen, yeah? Kaplan and so on and so forth. The Jewish Volksbank on the main street, and then in the central bank on this street. And Berger and whatever, a proof of the presence of a big Jewish community here. Modern life of Keidainiai today. Shops and coffee shops and young people coming out from the school and clerks who work in the offices or in the museum here and so on and so forth. So actually lively city, one of the 10 biggest cities of Lithuania. We are in St. Joseph Church in Kedainiai. It's a wooden church which was built in 1766 and was never destroyed, was never burned down. Interesting decoration, quite simple, not very typical to the Catholic church, austere, but everything is wooden. We continue our virtual tour in Keidainiai on street by the name of noble family Radzivill. And there you can see a big church which belonged to them, and it's a Protestant church. Radzivills, they were known as the first Protestants, or those who supported Christian reformism in Lithuania. In general, Lithuania remained a strictly Catholic country with a predominant number of Catholic people, but still there are small communities of Lutherans or Evangelic Protestant people. So here in Keidainiai, in the town of Radzivill family, we can still see and visit a church of Radzivill. Now it is closed, so we can't enter, but it's open as a museum. It's not a really active church. Statue of Radzivill family. There were many famous Radzivills. One of them was a cardinal. There were bishops. They were landlords. There was a period of time when they owned 2/3 of the territories of Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Lithuania today is a relatively small country. Once it used to be 17 times bigger than it is now. So Radzivills played a very important role in the history of Lithuania. We are now on the central square, on a new market square, which developed as an alternative to an old market square where we've been recently. Here were trading rows. This was the municipality of Kedainiai, Keidan, and a lot of important events happened here, as Keidan was a city where Lithuanians signed a peace agreement with different countries during different wars, during the Northern War and so on and so forth. Commercial importance of this place is very high as well. A new market, shops here and there, and so on. Now, there are some unique architectural features in Keidainiai as well. For example, these two houses which dominate on that part of the square, they have not typical Lithuanian facades. They belonged to Scottish people who settled in Lithuania. There are two versions how Scots got to Lithuania. One of them is that they were persecuted in Great Britain, and they ran away and found shelter at the estate of Radzivills. And another version is slightly different, that they looked for an alternative, looked for commercial opportunities and were brave and traveled far away and reached, let's say, northern and northeastern part of Europe, Lithuania. After being in many other places of Kedainiai, we are back on the old market square, and here we see a memorial. This memorial was erected not so long ago by the initiative of the citizens of nowadays citizens of Keidainiai, and you see it's a triangle with a third eye in the center of it, which symbolizes the Holy Spirit. The rays of light symbolizes the burning bush, and this memorial is in honor of the victims of the Holocaust. Now, in the pupil of an eye, you can see more 2,000 bullet shells. If to be precise, it's 2,079 bullet shells. This is the exact number of the victims of the Holocaust massacre in Keidainiai, in the forest not far from Keidainiai. So it's very symbolic. It's in the very center of this town, and it's an initiative of local people. So we are on the old Jewish cemetery in Keidainiai. There were two cemeteries. Right. One was older than this one, and this one also called the old cemetery.
Old, of course.
Not far from here.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of stones standing.
Yeah.
Of course, some of them are missing, but all in all, we can say that this cemetery is well preserved.
Very good.
And it's a good example for other towns. So there were efforts of Jews from all over the world to support the restoration and renovation of the cemetery, and also we can say that local municipality, together with the multicultural center, they did a perfect job to support the initiative and to maintain the old Jewish cemetery, which is not in use since the Second World War.
Yes.
And here is an interesting tombstone. The name is missing. Here was a plaque with the name which is missing, but it's in the shape of a cut tree, which symbolizes that somebody died relatively young, as we say in Hebrew, before time. And also it has an anchor, or a shape of an anchor, which I don't know what the symbolism is.
We are at the memorial site for 2,076 Jews of Keidan that were shot dead at this place, at this trench.
Yeah, this is the actual mass grave, one of the more than 200 mass graves in Lithuania.
And the new inscription that was changed after the Soviet period, that didn't mention the Jews, says: "Auf dem Ort haben die Nazi-Rotzchim unsere ortige Behelfer ermordet 2076 Jiden." In this place, on 28th of August 1941, Nazi murderers and their local helpers shot 2,076 Jews of Keidan.
And the new memorial was erected not so long ago at the entrance to this terrible place, and it has names of Jews from Keidan, and out of the 2,000 people who were killed here, local authorities succeeded to make a list of over 1,000 people who were killed here. So we will light candle in honor of Holocaust victims, in honor of all Holocaust victims actually.
We find here people that we know personally, members of the families living in Israel or in the United States. Some of them, Gotleris Shalomas, it is an uncle of my close friend, and we find even people that belong to our Gurvitch family, our big family I mean. Gurvitch Moshe, Gurvitch Reuven, Gurvitchute Liba, Gurvitchus Nachumas, וכולי וכולי וכולי. I told it in Hebrew. It went out automatically. We find here names of our families. The idea and the initiative belongs to the director of Keidainiai Historical Museum, and he and his colleagues, including Audronė Pečiulytė, the head of the Multicultural Center, they made really a great job identifying the names of half of the number of victims that were shot dead here.
After visiting the old Jewish cemetery and the mass grave, we come back to the central part of the town. We are on the shore of the Nevezhis River, just next to the old city and the Jewish quarter, to summarize our virtual tour of Keidainiai. So we have seen churches and synagogues and the Jewish heritage and Lithuanian heritage, and the cemetery and the mass graves, and we have seen a beautifully preserved old city, interesting places. We have talked to Audronė, and this is the idea of our project, to show you the highs and lows of different places, shtetls, towns of Lithuania, and to show the tribute of local people to preserve and to keep the heritage, both their own Lithuanian heritage and the Jewish heritage, and how it is done in a nice way in Lithuania. Thank you for being with us and watching our YouTube channel or our Facebook page.